you, Clive, for the invitation to be here and to talk about resilience. It is a topic that I think everybody around the world is talking right now. So, just a little bit about me. I started the Australian Federation of International Students when I was at university, and that's probably one of the first things that people would have known me for because I started that at 21 while I was still at university to help international students. And through that experience, I was able to bring the conversation around international students into the Australian government and mainstream discussion about the needs and difficulties of international students. And yeah, so that was probably the one of the main things that I did when I was in my 20s. Um, and through that experience, I was able to understand a little bit more about. There's a sector in Australia, in Melbourne, we call it the multicultural sector, which is basically working with migrants, refugees, anybody who's from a non English speaking background. And with that experience, I joined an organization called Action on Disability within ethnic communities. So it's people with disability from different cultural communities. So you've got your double barrier where you've got your disability but also can't speak English, potentially not speak English. And so, and I guess one of the other accomplishment that I had around that time was I became a manager at 26. So I had my whole team. It was my first experience as a manager, to manage a team of about 32 people. And that was a huge learning curve to understand the responsibilities, how to manage a group of people, but also look after staff as well. And at the time, I remember thinking, if I was a mum, it would have been so much easier because you know then how to look after people. So it was interesting at the time. And also I joined my first big board, a proper governance board at 26 as well. So I started a lot of this work quite early. And then I started my and then I left the organization and then started my business, Cultural Intelligence, in 2012. And so my business basically used a lot of the skills that I learned within the disability organization that I was in, and do consulting around cultural diversity and helping government departments, the corporate, understand cultural diversity and how people might think differently, how people might act differently, and hence when people create services and design projects that they can keep that in mind. Very, I think it's slightly different to what you would necessarily see in articles, but I think authenticity can only be measured by yourself. So it's not really about how people see you, because only you know whether or not something is fully authentic. People might feel it, but then nobody really knows because they're not you. And but then in order to be authentic, you do need to know your values and be able to articulate them, but also live up to your values. So and a lot of people say, you know, this is what I believe in, but then when you look at the actions, it's different from what they say they wanted to do. So be able to reflect on yourself to say, okay, well, I talk about, you know, I want to be fair, for example. And as a leader, you want to be fair to people and you want to be respectful to people. But then what does fair and respect actually look like? I think that's actually one of the key things in authentic leadership, is to really be able to understand your behavior and see whether or not it's actually, you know, the values that you say you want to portray. Really interesting experience. I must say, I didn't really have a good mentor on how to do that either. I had mentors on how to work with diverse people. I had mentors on how to lead teams, but I didn't have mentors on how to manage diverse teams. And I think that's part of my personality. I like a bit of challenge. So I enjoy the fact that nobody, well, very few people have done it. And, or, if they have done it, they're probably leading global teams that I don't have access to at the time anyway. So at the time, so basically just worked it out myself and try different things and observe very closely as to how people react to things, and then always question myself, okay, am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong? Could I have done this better? Is there another effective way of doing it? Or if I've made a mistake, also apologize. And I think that was one of the key things. And I had people actually came to me and said that I really like that, if you don't know something, you actually say that. Effort, and it's harder for the manager. It takes a lot more skill as a manager to be able to do that. But the advantage is you will get diverse perspectives on that team because you're getting people from different backgrounds telling you different things. And especially if you are, for example, running a business, and especially in Australia, we have very multicultural communities. If you don't have people with that understanding on your team to tell you, well, I can tell you that, for example, the Middle Eastern communities in Australia will not like that product. If you don't have a person like that on the team, you would never know until you actually get it out to the market, and then people just don't buy it, right? Or even in global situations, global teams. And one example I always use is Walmart in China. And we know Walmart didn't do very well in China, right? And I was just saying to a lot of people, if they had a Chinese person on the Walmart team, or a person who understands cultural diversity on the Walmart board of management, or even as their senior management team, they would know that, for example, if you have a Western brand in China, people expect luxury, people expect, good quality, not cheap, whatever. Because you can't compete on price when you go to China. That's just doesn't happen. Very rarely it can happen, right? And so you don't really compete on price. So what can you compete on? You can compete on other things, right? So that's actually one of the key benefits of having culturally diverse teams and having multiple perspectives on your team, so that you don't go to China and then fail. You actually fix everything before you actually go to China and then be able to succeed. That's goes to the heart of leading diverse teams, I think, is being flexible and being very agile. So I can easily lead from the front, or I can lead from the back as required. So depending on what the situation requires me to do. So I can inspire people during a speech, but I can also just sit back and just let others do their thing. And also, jump in to help out if people are running into problems. So I guess that's probably the main aspect to my leadership style, and also understanding multiple perspectives. So, and I think that's the training that I had working with diverse teams. I've developed a way for myself to understand how people think. So when people talk to me, I can really see it from their perspective. And when I say that, it's really thinking about, okay, well, how were they potentially raised at home? And therefore they might have a certain view on certain things and where they're coming from. And that helps when you work in very diverse teams. When you just say, if you for example, there's a African Australian in the team, And if you understand the family structures a little bit within their communities, you start to understand, the way they talk about things, it's coming from that space. And then, therefore, their contribution, how that might impact on decision making. Leader, I've never actually wanted to be that. Like, it wasn't really in my consciousness. It was just, I just wanted to do things. And even starting AFIS, and that's the International Student Organization. It was only because I wanted to help international students, but also create events for international students. I wasn't really thinking about, I want this to be the greatest organization to support international students. That was never really my plan. Um, but it's just so happened that it happened that way. And I think the more you do, the more people will come to you, and it kind of just rolls. And even becoming a manager at a young age as well, it was because I joined the organization because I was interested and passionate about the issue. I didn't join the organization wanting to be the CEO or the manager of that organization. So it was more me finding what I'm interested in. And I mean, a lot of people talk about finding passion, and I think that is very important, to be able to find a passion and just go with it, and not thinking about, I want to be the CEO straight away, but rather, okay, well, I really like to do this. It could even just be like social media. I really like social media, and therefore I'm going to invest time, invest effort, invest everything into that. And when people can see your work, then they will come to you. Because in Australia, a lot of people who are migrants, especially from Hong Kong, we still watch TVB. We still watch a lot of drama. And I remember watching that and then think, oh, one day I would love to be able to write proposals. Like, like, how when people ask kids, what do you want to do when you grow up? You'd say, being a police person, or, you know, uh, being a leader, whatever it is. But I wanted to write proposals. Like, who would have thought? And I was watching, some of the drama and thought, oh, I wonder what people actually include in those proposals and those business reports. And yeah, so it's really funny. But that was one of the interesting memories that I had, rather than wanting to be a leader or, having another dream. In my personal life, I think I think the biggest challenge for me is migrating to Australia, and leaving family in Hong Kong, and because I was raised in Hong Kong by my grandparents, so my grandmother and my grandfather raised me, like many people, I think, in Hong Kong. But after I migrated, I was living with my parents, so it took a bit of time to actually to actually live with my parents full time, really, because I always lived with my grandparents. So that was probably one of the difficulties, I guess. But then at the same time, also. Uh, Migrating to Australia and learning English and in a different culture, all that really, it's an obstacle. And also, I think for me, I've always kept my Chinese culture. I've always liked that. And like I said, I watch a lot of drama, and I love the martial arts ones. So I can't access that in English, and so because of that, I had to find a way to allow myself to be Australian when I was at school, but then when I go home, I can still watch my martial art movies and martial art drama. I mean, sometimes it's also environmental as well. So there are lots of people who would experience racism, for example, And even for me, there were some incidents, but they were not major incidents. But I know and have heard of people who've experienced some very serious racism incidents when they're at school. Um, but then one of the things that I see a lot of young people do is completely try to not be Chinese. So they would try and not speak Chinese. They would try and, get away from parents,
Right.
and also thinking, parents needs to also learn English, and not basically not touch any Chinese anything. I guess one of my advice would be to not do that, to actually understand your cultural heritage, because to be a leader, you need to really understand yourself in order to be authentic. So we talk about authentic leadership a lot. It's always in any leadership research. And but in order for you to be authentic, you have to know who you are to be authentic, and culture is always going to be part of it. And so if you reject a section of yourself, then you will never be full. Asians in Australia, international students in Australia, it's really hard for some of them to find their passion. So when we talk about finding passion, it's actually really hard for them to understand. So when I say finding passion, what I really mean is finding things that makes them excited, and finding things that will light them up. Even subjects. I remember I realized that I like certain subjects and not like subjects, because when lecturers talk about it, I get excited about it. So so that's how I work out, oh, okay, maybe I like this better and not that. So that's how you can eventually find your passion. I guess the first thing is, especially being a young person, to just do it, just try it out. Because I think when I first started, I actually find this quite interesting, because I remember the first time when people approached me to share experiences or to be interviewed on mainstream radio, to have the opportunity to speak to a whole huge audience. I just said yes and think about how I'm going to do it later. So I didn't think, okay, can I do it? Whether or not I have the experience to do it, because I kind of assumed, well, the fact that you asked me means that you think I'm good enough to do it. So the question then is, what am I going to say? So yeah, so that would be the second part. And what am I going to say? I can always work that out soon. I can ask people if I don't know, or if I really wanted to know who the audience would be, I can ask people that might know, and get mentors to be able to assist me with my preparation. In order to be resilient, you have to take life less seriously. And I see every obstacle, every challenge as being an opportunity to play, to experiment, and to find new ways and solutions.